Alright, I guess now we can talk about another movie that is apparently a big hit on Netflix, which is The Babysitter Killer Queen, which is the sequel to The Babysitter that came out in 2017, which I saw when it came out, and I could have sworn I did, I did a video on it back then, but apparently I didn't. So, and I guess it's probably for the better that I didn't, because I don't know that I could have guessed that it would be as popular as it was, because I'm pretty sure I saw the first one, like, as soon as they put it on there, at least, in that couple of days after they put it out. And it became like a really big deal to a certain demographic, apparently, and they really, really loved it. And apparently quite a few people loved it, even outside of the demographic that it was aimed at, and yeah, I would not have been very kind to it if I had done a video on it, because I felt like just sort of immediately, it's one of those things that just gave me the vibe. It's basically like Happy Death Day. It just kind of immediately gave me the vibe that it was trying too hard to be something new and unique, but also like cool and modern at the same time. And I don't know, just all of it wasn't working. I did think it was interesting that it's an interesting concept to have, and I don't say this. Usually you do, but I don't say this in a condescending way. I mean just in general as a fact. The target demographic seems to be like 13 to 15-year-olds for both of these movies, despite it being like this pretty graphic R-rated movie. And there's something interesting there. I mean, obviously, there's like, like there's raunchy movies and comedies and stuff like that that have humor that appeals to a certain younger demographic than it's technically meant for. But it's sort of like just adult humor in general. How it's the whole thing where like when you're a kid, adult humor seems like the end all be all of humor, but when you're an actual adult, what's considered adult humor seems childish. But it's like the way that these movies have that way where it's like there's a whole this is something that seems like it would be the farthest away from that kind of demographic, but it feels literally tailor made for it and actually scored that demographic, like the demographic that they were going for, that's technically too young to see it, really loves it. So that in itself is unique. You can't deny. So I'll give them that. But I still felt that it didn't really work for me personally. But once again, I'm apparently not in that demographic. But I said I feel like the first movie had quite a few fans in various age groups. So all power to it, and it just didn't work for me. So obviously I didn't really give much of a shit, but at the same time was not surprised by the fact that they went ahead and made another one 3 years later. So and we're still keeping up with like I'd forgotten most of the first one, except for the one thing that really stood out to me actually was Bella Thorne. But as I was watching this one, the first one like really started to come back to me. So to the point that I recognize like some of the opening jokes are just like literal callbacks, where we have the same setup where it's Cole talking, and then he's talking to he's talking to the nurse, and now in this one it's the same thing, but now the nurse is also the guidance counselor, and apparently the director McGee, who's typically known for his action movies up to this point, and We Are Marshall, because he's all over the place. Apparently his direction to the actor playing the nurse slash guidance counselor was funny equals just keep talking. Like, even when the scene should have been cutting minutes ago, just keep talking. And so that's the key to the humor in this opening scene. And then we are introduced to some returning characters, mainly Melanie, the girl that he had, like, that was like his love interest in the first movie that ended up getting caught up in everything. Who is, I only just now realized, is Snakebite Andy in Doctor Sleep. So, I'm guessing this has been out long enough that we're kind of in spoiler territory at this point, to where I can just kind of say whatever. So if not, this is that warning. This is the spoiler warning you're getting right now. Because the first thing obviously that occurred to me as things are revealed in the first half of the movie, or even the first third of the movie, is that obviously it's no surprise that Melanie is now part of the cult after having just been in the True Knot in Doctor Sleep. It kind of felt like there was barely a transition there. But before we go into that, I could just say, like, it was trying too hard and the humor wasn't working, the way I was criticizing the guidance counselor scene just now. The really confounding thing about this movie is that it actually does have some genuinely funny moments in it. Like, I felt like I was laughing more consistently for sure than I was with the first one. But they were just kind of, they're like big laughs, but just like kind of the cheap laughs. But they were still there, which is commendable. But the confounding thing is that whenever it would get one of those like small laughs, like where something was actually funny, there would be, like, the very next moment would be a joke that just completely falls flat. And when this type of, not just these movies, but when this type of movie has a joke fall flat, usually it's monumentally flat. And it's like, and it goes like way into like cringe territory by that point, and it gets to the point where you can tell it's adults writing for a significantly younger demographic and embarrassing the shit out of themselves for it. And it's one of those cases where they're trying to be playful enough to where they could play it off as either they were genuinely trying to sound like modern teenagers, or they were doing some sort of parody or something, or it was intentionally cringe or something like that. But the fact that the movie does actually end up trying to get sincere a few times makes me think that they were trying to genuinely accomplish some sort of, like, that in the dialogue and stuff like that. But now, of course, and I'm getting really fucking tired of saying this, but it just keeps happening, I feel like it's in, like, a Netflix contract or something where every Netflix original movie, or most of them, the shitty ones, which is like 90% of them, there's a certain list of rules that the screenwriters are given, and one of those is 50% of your dialogue or more needs to just be movie references. Just reference other things. Whatever you can possibly think of, just reference other things in the dialogue. It's all shitty Netflix comedies take that approach. It feels like, anyway. Obviously, I haven't seen all of them, thank Christ, but the ones that I have seen, it feels like that's the approach. It's just reference other movies whenever you possibly can. And this one starts off doing that a little bit until it's fucking out of control. And there's there's one that makes sense where, like, he's, when he's talking to the guidance counselor about how, all the events of the first movie he's now trying to relay to other people, and now they think he's insane. And he says he feels like Sarah Connor in T2, and that makes sense. That's a good analogy of what he's going through right now. But it doesn't last. And sometimes there's ones that are just like they don't even try to give them context. Like, they just don't, like, let's say when the new girl, Phoebe, I think her name is dropped off by a truck, like a semi-truck, and when she gets out, she makes the Pee-wee's Big Adventure reference. She just says, we don't see the person or anything like that. There's no exchange here. The scene is just her hopping out of the truck. She turns to the driver and says, I'll be sure to tell them Large Marge sent me. And then she closes the door and walks away. What does that have to do with anything apart from just existing as a reference, as saying, like, hey, we've seen Pee-wee's Big Adventure, we know what that line comes from. It has no purpose here whatsoever. It's not the punchline to anything, it's just a line, because they don't want to come up with their own dialogue. They're too fucking lazy to come up with anything else for these characters to say to somehow possibly be their own individual thing. That is asking way too much of the writers, apparently. So that's what a lot of the dialogue is, and what's even funnier is a lot of it is stuff that is the people who, watch this kind of thing are not even gonna know. There's a point in time where the returning characters, like Bella Thorne and the others that died in the other one, who are now resurrected, they're referred to as the old ones. And it's when it occurred to me, it's like, oh yeah, the target demographic for this movie, they're still young enough that 3 years is an eternity to them. So, so that's what, and like I said, I want to make this clear. Whenever I refer to the demographic, it's not to be condescending. I just feel like that's the reality of it. Is 13 to 15 year olds are who this movie was made for. Like just looking by the way the characters act and the way they talk and behave and stuff like that. That's the only thing I can take away from this. As far as who this was made for, which makes it even more confusing when we have a lot of references that they're probably are gonna not even notice. And when that's like so much of the dialogue, then there's this confusion of who are you. It's like the writers trying to entertain themselves while make this the writing job as easy on themselves as possible. And it's just annoying, really, but whatever. But yes, we do get returning characters, as I was saying, and it's pretty much the same setup, just in a different location, because now they're on like this giant lake, at this sort of getaway where Cole has run away to with Melanie, before Melanie's revealed, because they are going to send him to like some psychiatric hospital because he's trying to explain to people that the events of the first movie happened, when nobody witnessed this except for Melanie, pretty much. So, and B has disappeared, so, yeah. But, then once we pretty much established that we're pretty much doing the same thing, just in kind of a bigger, location, yeah, it's the reveal of he happens to be there, and it's revealed that Melanie's part of the cult, so she kills one of the friends they brought with them, and then Bella Thorne and all the others, that die in the first movie come back, and the cult is still now the same group. Except B is still missing, apparently. So I suppose now that we're at this moment, I can probably give it credit for one thing, which is the kill factor of it. Because obviously it is a horror movie, and it's going to have these really elaborate and gruesome deaths in it and stuff like that. And for a movie like this, with the kind of tone that it's going for, that'll play a big part in like the entertainment value of it, as weird as that might seem. But, because obviously there's a clear, two different kinds of executing that, if you'll excuse the pun, I guess, where we have the actual, like, use of fake blood, and then the also really obvious CGI, where, like, particularly if something explodes, if a body explodes or a head explodes or something, it'll be really obvious CGI and really obvious CGI blood, but you can also tell quite a bit when it's like actual fake blood, which kind of gives it a bit more of an old-fashioned feel, for the kind of movies that it's trying to emulate from the past. So when it's actually able to do that and get creative with that, it can be commendable, I guess. And this one does kind of go. And the first one did that to an extent. It kind of felt like they put some thought into it for some of them, but then for the others they got kind of a bit lazy, like hanging by a tree or blowing up a fireworks or something. But it's not always necessarily the kill itself. There's also like how it is, like when we had Sonia, I think, said like some sort of thing where it's like we thought she might have survived the fireworks and then she actually exploded or something like that, which is fine. And then here they go all in making the kills like bigger and more graphic and more disgusting, which surely is part of what you're here for, right? So they do have fun with that in regards to like trying to make it as campy as possible, which they accomplish pretty well. But still, there's a lot of stuff that's sort of just annoying, really, I guess. Like the whole thing about having the characters come back, there is we get these tiny little, just minuscule flashes that are like 10 seconds long, where each new character gets like a flashback to how exactly they were entered into the cult. And when I say like 10 seconds, that's about what it actually is, where we get barely an introduction of what they were doing when B found them and recruited them, and then that's it. And you think like, oh, is there going to be more? Is that going to go somewhere? Is it going to be significant? No. No, it's like 5 or 10 seconds of just be finding them, and that's it. I have no idea why it's here. I don't. It's like if they were going to go into that, I'd almost think that could be its own movie. Is how she recruited them individually and what went on from there. But no, just little 10-second clips, I guess, just to kill time. I guess even though you're not even really killing any time. It's probably less than 60 seconds between all the clips together. So whatever. But as far as like other backstories go, naturally, now that we have a new character here like Phoebe, we have to get her backstory, and of course, because she's a love interest to Cole now, it's gonna be a tragic backstory. Because ask any mediocre writer, is there any other kind of backstory but a tragic backstory? So it gets to the point where she's one of the first big deaths has happened, and just when you're like, reveling in how campy it is, she gets all serious and she says, that's not the first time I've seen someone die. So it's like, okay, we get it. It was probably your parents or something. Since you haven't mentioned them yet and nobody's mentioned them yet, it was probably your parents. And you act all rebellious and shit, so we'll run with that. We've got it now, okay? Just by you saying one line, we got it, but okay. So then eventually we start getting flashes of a car accident. And it's like, oh, that must be what it was. Okay, we got it. Okay. But then it keeps going, because it never happens in just flashes or just one line. We have to eventually have the scene we can all sleep during, where there is a full scene devoted to getting the full tragic backstory. But it's like, as she's saying, like, when it happened, I was here, and it's like, yeah, we know, and it's like, my parents were this, and it's like, yeah, we know, we already know, we know. But it's still a whole scene devoted to it. And you could make the argument that it has more importance as it's revealed. But I mean, if you're trying so hard to be like really fresh and unique, all these other things that you're trying to do in different ways, like the video game fight and shit like that. Surely to God you could have come up with a more clever way to do the tragic backstory and still have it fit in with the plot in the way that it ultimately does. But it's just, as usual, inevitably, it's the scene where it's like, we already know this and where it's going and how we're supposed to feel. So, whatever. And it's such an autopilot device, the tragic backstory. Like, it's when the writers just do not want to put any effort into anything, but want to somehow get emotion out of the audience. And you just hit every beat we all already know. And it's like, so you could write the shit no, I'm not just gonna say you could write a tragic backstory in your sleep. You could write a tragic backstory in a fucking coma, and it would be the same goddamn thing. And so that's how that scene goes. So there's that. And so talking about this video game fight between, I think it's Melanie and Phoebe. This is another case where it's, when I was talking about where it's clearly adults writing for a significantly younger demographic. Do you know when, like, dads in particular, like dads with daughters, where, like, they'll do that thing where they're kind of trying to be cool, but it's also, like, an intentional tactic to embarrass their daughter. That's kind of the kind of mentality that feels like went into writing this video game fight and constructing this video game fight. Like, why is it like that? Like, what other previous video game references set that up? Or is it just hey, kids like video games. Kids will like this movie. Let's do that. Let's make the fight like it's a video game. And one of the old arcade video games at that, which is something that 13 to 15-year-olds in 2020 give a shit about. So, I don't know. I know, I'm in this weird ground of being like the cranky old man that doesn't like the movies made for younger people, but at the same time criticizing it because the writers seem to come off that way. I don't know, so whatever. But then, yeah, like I was saying, though, we're dealing with, like, the camp factor, with, like, the over-the-top gory kills, the weird-ass comedy, the sex scene that's interpreted by a big dance sequence and hot dogs going into... It doesn't... It's, so we get that whole thing, what the whole movie is, the stupid references, all that shit, and it tries to actually have a genuinely emotional ending. And I, and as I've said before many times, there have been times where that works, trying to do all those different tones and then somehow be serious about yourself. But this isn't it. Not for this movie. Because it goes way too far off in its other directions. That it was never in a million years going to successfully come back and stick the landing of trying to be deathly serious. But apparently it worked on the people it was targeted towards, so apparently they did something right for what they were reaching for, but it's embarrassing from a different perspective. So, and then to keep going, I feel like anybody that would even watch a video that's a review of this movie is going to hate me for everything that I'm saying about it, and now I'm just going to keep digging that hole deeper because, yes, eventually Samara Weaving does come back, and I have made it apparent before this that Samara Weaving is just not an actress that's been working for me. Whether it be, the first of these movies, or Ready or Not, or especially Guns Akimbo, just I get that especially in the first one, she was supposed to seem like effortlessly cool and the kind of girl that you'd have like a crush on, especially if you were Cole's age. But it's just so try hard and cringe. Like everything Samara Weaving has done up to this point that I can remember off the top of my head is just like, she's just so cringe to me. I don't know how else to put that. But like, I don't know. But, like, and I can say that even in small doses, because she did it again to me in this movie, and she's in it for, like, 5 minutes, and there's, like, one particular moment in that 5 minutes of screen time where I'm like, oh, God, this is why she doesn't work for me. And I say that, I'm not just gonna say she's a bad actress, because people love her. Like, she's really breaking out. So I'm not going to try to make it this some objective statement and say, oh my gosh, she fucking sucks, I hate her. No, once again, I'm in some sort of minority, so, and I'll just take that whenever Samara Weaving waltzes into the next movie she's going to be in, whatever that is. And once again, this has happened before, though, where I'm just not a fan of an actress at all, and then eventually, I'll see what the big deal is, but it's in roles like this, it's just really not. But I think it's also maybe honestly, actually okay. Let me take all this back. I still don't know for sure if it's actually her, because when I talk about how cringy I feel like she is and a lot of her performances are, she's always in cringy movies. Like, once again, I know everybody loves Ready or Not, but it was like it felt like black comedy for beginners, and it felt like they were trying way too hard. Just like these movies feel like they're trying way too hard. And let's not even talk about Guns Akimbo again. I already did that video, and I'm still, like, tired from... So yeah, I still don't know even if it's actually her or just the material she ends up in. I don't know. But either way, I am not a fan at all. So, I think, and talking about the try-hard thing, I think the reason it feels like everything is trying so hard in regards to movies like this is that maybe you could say it's become a cult movie. I mean, obviously it literally is, but also as far as its audience. But the thing here is that it's clearly made that way. Like, they clearly went into it saying, I want to make a cult classic, is what they went into these two movies saying. But the thing about that is you can't go into a cult classic saying, I want to make a cult classic. Cult classics happen by accident. That's the whole point of that whole thing, is you don't see it coming when cult classics become that. And it's like the way, like, it comes back to the stupid fucking Sharknado shit. You can't do it on purpose and have it have the same effect. I know for some reason it works in certain groups and they still find followings, but you can't call that shit. It's and I'm not trying to gatekeep and say what's what, but I mean that's just not how it fucking works. You you I don't know. So it's trying so hard to be like so over the top and extreme and clever, and it's just so fucking see through that it's clear what they were trying to do, and like I said, I'm sure a lot of people felt like they succeeded, and good for them, and I'm happy for all of them that they're happy with the whole thing. But this just, I'm just really tired of this trying to be, like, actively trying to be a cult classic thing. And just, I don't know. It's just, they're just trying way too hard to me, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. So, I'm just going to leave this at this. So we're going to continue to do this. There's 2 more of these. I'm going to do one more Versus that's related to horror, and then one more franchise, and then November is going to be a bunch of the new stuff that's been coming out. So until all of that stuff, I think that's it for this.